and welcome back to Screw the Script, the podcast where we ditch the timelines, challenge the shoulds, and talk about what it really means to build a life in your 30s. Today's episode is about infertility, but not the version you usually hear, because this story is filled with needles, hormone swings, hospital stays, and somehow a whole lot of laughter too. My guest is a dear friend who went through multiple rounds of IVF, relocated mid treatment, and still managed to keep her spirit, her marriage, and her sense of humor intact. And plot twist, it wasn't her body, quote unquote, not working. The fertility challenge was on her husband's side. And yep, we go there. If you've ever had to turn heartbreak into hope or make lemonade out of medical chaos, this one is for you. Welcome, and let's screw the script.
What was your script about for your fertility journey going into it, not knowing what you know now?
That's such a hard place to start.
Back to the beginning. When you met your husband,
Yep.
You got married. Did you guys, before you guys got married, did you talk about having kids? Did you know what your fertility statuses were before going into it? Or was it just more of like...
So we didn't have a plan. Okay. So good question. Kind of what had we discussed beforehand? We definitely talked about kids. His big thing was I think he told me this within a couple of weeks of dating. He always wanted a football team of kids. Here I am thinking American football, but I think it was 11. He said he wanted 11 kids because he wanted his own little football team. So I kind of laughed that off, thinking, okay, this man's crazy. We'll talk about it when it gets, when we have one or two, he'll realize that 11 is out of the question. But I was fully confident that we would come to that realization together. But in terms of timing, my parents always raised me to take my time, don't rush into things, don't rush into marriage. They never pressured us for grandkids. I think they never pressured us really into anything. They kind of wanted us to figure out our own path. And so with kids, we weren't in a hurry, because neither of us felt a need for it at that point. And we were also moving a lot. So I had just moved out to Singapore. And then right before we got married, about maybe almost a year before we got married, we moved out to Germany. And we knew Germany it was, ended up being 5 years. We thought it would be probably 2. And then we had no idea where we would be going after Germany. And so we had a lot of moving parts in our life already. And so it wasn't really this sense of urgency. And then, to be honest, I don't even remember when things turned, where we had a conversation of, okay, maybe, let's try. It was probably, we were still living outside Frankfurt. We got married. Oh gosh, now I have to start remembering years.
What year did you guys get married? Do you remember the year at least?
It was either 2018 or 2019. Wow, I actually don't remember which year it was. It was either 2018 or 2019. I know that. But at some point after that, maybe a year after that, we were like, okay, let's see what happens. Let's pull the goalie and so we had taken that approach, just, not trying, but not trying. And then I think it was maybe a year of trying. And by the end, we were like, okay, let's actually give this a shot. And I think there was 1 week where I was ovulating where we gave it a shot twice a day for a week. And at some point, it stopped being this like carefree process to like, why isn't this working? And that's kind of when we said, okay, maybe we should start looking a little bit closer at this. At that point, we had moved up to Hamburg, right? So all the images of us trying, if you will, get that image out of your head, all of that was outside Frankfurt. So then we had moved up to Hamburg. So this was all work related, but the move took us up, which is obviously where we met. And that's where we said, okay, let's see what else is going on. And so we found a fertility doctor downtown Hamburg, and she was incredible. Our first fertility doctor we found, same clinic, but he was doing kind of like a training style type thing. Do you remember? I think I told you about him. I had a really negative experience with him. It was very awkward. I kind of said, okay, and I'm a people pleaser to a certain extent. And so I was like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to do my appointments. I just don't feel comfortable in this scenario. And so he's always amazing. He will always advocate and like get things sorted for me. And so he went to the clinic and said, hey, listen, because we also, for some reason, it was hard to get a doctor, if I remember correctly.
Really?
And so, it was hard to find a doctor that would take on patients or that could take one on urgently. He wanted to start that football team. And you know him, when he gets his mind set on something, he's going to do it and he's going to get it done tomorrow. The second we had the conversation of, hey, maybe we should start looking into this, he was like, okay, let's get a doctor. Let's go see them this afternoon. Doesn't work like that. But of course, for him, it does. He called them, he got an appointment. We had this doctor that I wasn't comfortable with. And then he went and spoke to them and said, hey, listen, she's not comfortable. Is there any way that we could work with another clinician there, another doctor? And so we ended up with this incredible fertility doctor. She was amazing. And so we went in and we kind of started the testing process.
So what was your mindset going into this? Did you have any, because granted, we've had like one fertile moment, or I guess coupled with the fact that I am probably similar to your husband, where I am like, let's do this 2 days ago.
Yes, you are.
And going into my marriage, we actually got our fertility tested before we got married. I mean, I knew I was going to marry my husband. At the same time, I like to know things before I go into it. So I know what kind of mindset I need to be in, what kind of plan I need to put in place so that my timeline, which I'm learning isn't always guaranteed, but I still like to keep some sort of a timeline. So when we found out the information of our fertility, thankfully, everything was clear. But I think if I had found out that something we needed to plan accordingly, I would do some looking inward. If it was me or if it was my husband, there would be that either judgments, fears, skepticisms, doubts. Of course, I love my husband and I'm learning to love myself. And I feel like now I'm at a point where I do. At the same time, like when you find information out where you would generally think like you're healthy, like why is this part of your body not working the way it should? Any of those kind of thoughts going into it about yourself and or about your partner?
So I would say, okay, so my husband, as you know, is from Singapore. He's very structured. He's, like you, if he wants something done, it should have been done yesterday. He's very much like you, wants the information, wants the solution. I was raised by a bunch of hippies north of Seattle. And so I didn't have a timeline. I wasn't too stressed. When we decided to go see a fertility doctor, I thought that was cool. I wasn't worried. Nothing really crossed my mind to say like, ooh, okay, red flags or be concerned or make a plan. I just was kind of, okay, this is the next step. Let's go see the doctor. I didn't feel too much stress about it, to be honest. He did. He was a little bit apprehensive. And sometimes I think however much you guys want information, sometimes taking the step to get that information when you know it could be bad, it's a big step to take.
Right.
And so
actually, I'm thinking to myself as you're answering about your disposition going into this experience, having a bit of ease. I think that's probably that was a good thing, right? Like going now knowing what you know now.
Yeah. And it was, and it helped throughout the process. That's for sure. And I think, this is a funny thing to say because it's not that I was undecided, but a part of me was like, the question was never, do I want kids or do I not want kids? Because I've always, I taught young kids ballet and I've always, when I was younger, I babysat all the time. I was just constantly around young kids. I knew I loved them. I knew I wanted them. But a part of me, and I think it's a normal question to ask yourself when you're venturing into something you've never done before. The question was, am I going to like it? Am I not going to like it? I don't know. I haven't done it before. Everybody says they like it. So I guess I'll probably like it. So we'll just have kids. That was kind of my mindset going into it. Having it not work, it started getting frustrating because I think anytime something isn't working, no matter how much you want it or don't want it, you get frustrated, right? By the process. When we decided to see the fertility clinic, the doctor, I wasn't too stressed about it. It's hard to remember back to how my husband was feeling, but I think he was pretty okay. He was ready for some answers at that point. And so we went, we found a doctor finally after kind of the process of filtering out this first doctor. And we went and had our test done. But so then we did the test, everything came back and, okay, so my timeline is off right now. My timeline is off because we had done the test with the previous doctor. Because now I'm remembering, I was actually I think we were at a Christmas market or something, and I get a phone call about the test results. And it was this initial doctor. That's right. And he was telling me, so we hadn't switched doctors until after the test. He had called and he was a little bit confusing. His bedside manners were, it was a little bit confusing. And the timeline of my ovulation window, I was confused about that because I think he had said, oh, you just ovulated. I said, no, I ovulated 2 weeks ago. And he said, maybe you ovulated twice this month. And I was like, I don't, okay, you're the doctor. I haven't heard if that's possible, but okay. So, but everything else looked fine on my end, other than for some reason, the ovulation looked a little bit different timing wise. And it was a little bit weird, but everything was fine on my end. And then he had told me from side, I remember it being called the acronym MARS, but I think it's wrong because I've Googled it and I can't find anything online. But essentially, he had a high level of antibodies in his sperm. And typically this will come from like an injury or something, is how he explained it to us. Sometimes, rarely, it can happen just naturally. And so essentially these antibodies were killing off his sperm before they could find the eggs. Everything else looked fine. We just had to kind of access those sperm before the antibodies could kill them off. And to this day, I haven't done much research, but that was my understanding at the time. After that, we had the conversation with the doctor, with the clinic about switching doctors. And then I had gone in, we found this wonderful new doctor. And so I was kind of updating her with our experience so far. And so she was like, okay, and I've got your test results. And I said, yeah, so, this other doctor, he said that perhaps I ovulated twice. And she looked at me and she said, what? Maybe if you're a horse. Oh, is that not possible? She's like, no. You don't ovulate twice in a month. Anyhow, that doctor, she said, is no longer with the clinic. I'm really glad that we switched. But we talked about, okay, there are antibodies in my husband's sperm. What we'll need to do is, there's two different ways. There's IVF and there's ICSI. And the difference is IVF, you take the sperm, you take the egg, and you put them into a petri dish and you let them do their thing. Whereas where ICSI, the doctor will manually grab one sperm and will insert it into the egg, creating the embryo. They still have to then sit and form and create a blastocyst. All of that is just done naturally. But in terms of creating that initial embryo, that initial attachment, it's very manual in the sense that they look through the sperm, find the best one, yank it out, and then stick it into the egg. It's crazy. Science is awesome. We sat down, we had the conversation, and that was the plan to do ICSI.
So at the point of finding out the information about both of your fertilities and also finding out the two different options, at one point, and I'm sure this is before you guys made the final decision to the doctor, maybe this was during the discussion period. All right, we know that this isn't going to be happening naturally moving forward. And yes, you have the background and also values of kind of living through life, not necessarily having that future 10-year plan as maybe your husband would have. So what point did you guys have to start restructuring what your family planning would look like?
And, for my husband, for men in general, maybe I hate to generalize with this, and I think for everybody, right? If there had been something, if I had PCOS or if I had something that was causing the infertility, it would be something to kind of work through potentially. And so I think for him, it was kind of like, oh, wow. There was a moment of realization that did not faze me in the slightest that we had infertility anywhere within the marriage. It didn't bother me because there are solutions to that. And life always takes different paths, even if, ICSI didn't work out for us. But I think for him, it was like, there was a bit of a letdown that he had to work through. From my end, I was like, suck it up, buttercup. Let's get on with it.
I mean, I admire you so much about the stance that you're taking in this and that you took in this whole journey, because sometimes it's crippling.
Absolutely. And I've got friends that have experienced infertility and unexplained infertility, right? Where nothing came back from the test, and secondary infertility. And, I do think secondary infertility would be a lot harder because if you've had a child naturally, you're kind of questioning, why is this happening now? And you also know how cool it is to have kids. And so you really want another one. When going into that first one, there was so much unknown as to what parenting would be like, how much I would like it. Again, I knew I would like it, but I could never say 100% until you actually do it. I think that goes with everything in life.
Right.
So once we got the test results back, he had to, it was hard for him to hear, but he's the planner. And so for him also, I came from more of a kind of unemotional perspective of, all right, let's just do it. And for him, he's like, okay, well, that news, it's hard to hear, but now at least we have a plan. Let's get on with it.
Yeah. So now that I know that there's two different, because I had no idea about this.
ICSI. Yeah. So ICSI, ICSI. Functionally, there's no difference from my side, right? It's just in terms of how those embryos are created in the lab. Is the sperm naturally attracted to the egg? Do they, do their little swim in and find their way? But this way, it's just much more manual. So it takes a little bit, it's already a very invasive and unnatural situation. And there was the element of okay, now the doctor is really picking my child. But again, it's still going to be as randomized as it would have, that doesn't really bother me. Instead of whatever random sperm gets the egg, it's whatever random sperm the doctor picks. it's still randomized from that sense. And I loved my doctor. So I was like, pick a good one.
So with that, so with ICSI,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to fast forward a bit. We're going to go.
Yeah.
We know that you were pregnant with your daughter. So it was a successful round. And just correct me if I'm wrong. Did you do one round and it was successful?
No. So in terms of the manual element, that's just really identifying the sperm. But the chance of getting pregnant is just as, actually, I will tell you, the one time that I felt a little bit of disappointment through this that I can remember distinctly is when I looked at the rates of success. Because I went through all of this just being like, okay, so now we do this and then I get pregnant and da 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 da. And then I looked at the rates of success and there was a moment where I was like, wow, so this could actually not work. And that hadn't dawned on me before. And I think it was something like 40% chance after 2 rounds or something like that, which I went in thinking 90% or, overly optimistic. Because once you're doing IVF and you talk to people, everybody does IVF. And so you think, okay. And that was a bit disheartening. But so we did, just to go through the process a little bit, like it takes a month of hormone injections. And for me, those were the worst, the month leading up to the egg retrieval. And essentially what those hormones do is makes your ovaries produce more eggs. And so like you build the follicles up and that's where the eggs come. And so you want to, typically you produce 1 a month and then, that's released and that's when all part of your cycle release when you're ovulating. And when you do the hormone treatments, you want to produce not as many as you can, but up until about 18. If you produce over 18, you can get this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome type thing, which can be dangerous. And so they want to give you just enough hormones that you produce, 15 would be an excellent number. Sometimes people will produce 3. And even from that, then creating the embryos, right? They take the eggs and then they introduce them to the sperm, but there's no guarantee that creates an embryo. So a lot of times, let's use the number 5. Women will produce 5 eggs. And then, which seems like a very normal number, right? 15 is rare and an incredible number. Let's say you produce 5 and then you take out those 5, only 4 are viable, or in a lot of cases, 3 are viable. And then they introduce them to the sperm. And out of that, only 1 creates an embryo. So although you get 5 eggs, you might end up with 1 embryo, which is 1 chance with a 30%, 40% chance of it working. And so once you start going through the process and you see that there's a drop-off rate with every step, then it gets a little bit unnerving. And so with my first, when I had done the egg retrieval, and that had given me a lot of anxiety. I had never gone under general anesthesia before. That was, I don't have a lot of big fears in life. We were just talking about how you're kind of an adrenaline junkie and before this call. And my big fear was general anesthesia for some reason. And it was something, for weeks leading up to it, I had this fear that I was going to die on this, I don't want to call it an operating table because, you're in the stirrups and it doesn't feel like, but I had a really big fear of that. Turns out I loved it. Like the 10 seconds, 5 seconds before you go under was like the best drug ever. But so having overcome that fear, I was then excited if I had to do another round. I think we got, if I remember back, like 8 eggs or something.
Okay.
And then, so we had a good number and even better, it turned into 6 embryos. I mean, our doctors, and to give you an example, her jaw like dropped. She was like, this is excellent. No, we must have had 5 embryos. We had 5 embryos because we then did 1 round. So a round is, you do the hormones again, you make sure you're tracking your cycle with the doctor. So you're going in, every other day or something for checkups. And then when they say, okay, it's time to do the transfer, we did 1 transfer, which is essentially they insert the embryo and 10 days later they call you and it's, are you pregnant? Are you not pregnant? After going in and having done a blood draw. And so the first time I wasn't pregnant.
You weren't?
And so we had, no, the first transfer was negative. And that was the moment where I was like, ooh, okay, what now? And then you have to start over with the injections. And
wait. So even though you had.
No, you start again. So I had 5 embryos, right? I got 8 eggs and 5 embryos.
Okay.
And so we transferred the first.
Right.
But you have to go with your cycle and they manipulate your cycle so that it's very much on track. You're doing blood tests. They know exactly the best day to transfer. And so when it's like every month you're trying, right? You try for a month, but in this sense, you're taking injections and then they transfer the embryo and either you're pregnant or you're not. And if you're not, you have to do that whole thing again the next month, which is the injections going in, blood draws, go in for the transfer, which
Oh
is,
my
it's,
goodness.
and
You
so,
know, you're amazing. Like seriously, take a moment.
well,
Because you have this light about you, and you're such an incredible soul and just like aura and positive presence that I had no idea. And this also just goes to show you never really know what someone's going through behind closed doors. Because I mean, some people wear it on their sleeve, but you definitely are not that type of person. And fast forward with your second child, including a transcontinental move, plus doing all of this, no idea. Like amazing.
thanks. Yeah, it was, you just get on with it, I guess. I also am not afraid of needles. And so that was really helpful because there's a lot of needles process. But I'll tell you, my husband is very afraid of needles. I, for someone that's not afraid of needles, I can't do it myself. It was something that I just, for some reason, couldn't get over. And so he had to do it. So it was a process, again, that he had to deal with more so than me. There were a couple times, you have different medications you're taking throughout, and the needles are different. And so there's this one medication, and I think it was maybe the trigger shot that was maybe leading up to the egg retrieval. I don't remember, but anyhow, it was this needle that I knew I didn't like because it hurt a little bit worse. And sometimes there are some days you take 4 shots a day, and some days it was 1 or 2. He did this maybe 4 times throughout both of my children, the whole process for both, where he would he would shoot the needle in, and I'd go, oh, I'd like flinch, and it would frighten him, and he'd pull it out. No, before the medicine. And I would turn around, I'm like, are you kidding me? Because he would know that's the needle I don't like because it hurts more, which is why I flinch. And so it would scare him, and he'd pull the needle out. Oh man.
So another thing I'm learning is that in your situation, your partner had to go through kind of emotional shifts during this whole process. It seems like you were the one that was kind of maintaining like the even keelness of it all.
Yeah, we're emotional in different ways. That's for sure. But I think for him, I think he was more ready for kids than I was. He was ready to have them now. And I was kind of like, great if they come now, great if they come later. And so he was a bit more, I don't want to say he was eager because it makes me sound like I wasn't eager. Yeah, we were just trying to take it in stride, really. He probably had a couple more road bumps on the way of just, getting the test results, and then, the needles, poor him, the needles.
Not for him.
No.
Okay, so for this process, what did it not prepare you for? I mean, like I said, like you have such a happy-go-lucky approach with this, which I truly admire and love about you. The needles didn't really phase you besides maybe the size of a few, but is there anything else? And maybe, the realization of the success rates and how they kind of taper off in every stage. Was there anything else that just this process did not prepare you for, or you had inner conflict or struggle with?
Yeah, I would say, to back up a little bit, to my daughter, the first transfer didn't take. And so hearing that, because again, I went in thinking, okay, so this is what we do, next step, and then I get pregnant, and then the first transfer didn't take. And so then we had to start again the next month. And so crazy us, we're like, let's put in 2 embryos. Our doctor's like, don't do it. We're like, no, let's do it. Why not? And so we put in 2 embryos, and then that didn't work. So I was again not pregnant. And that's when we were like, okay, so we have 5 embryos, 3 are gone. It hasn't worked for 2 months. We only have 2 left. It's that whole idea of, wow, maybe this won't work, kind of started to creep up, which I wasn't expecting. I definitely went into it just thinking, 1 + 1 = 2. You do the tests, you do see, you go through all the emotions, and then you have the baby. That started to creep up, which was unexpected. And so then we put in what would that be? The 4th embryo for the next. And at this point, I'm like, well, I'm not going to be pregnant because that's just, we're now stuck in this. And I think at that point, I started to get a little bit concerned. We were visiting one of my good friends, my neighbor in Hamburg. We were just kind of outside on the lawn chatting, and I got the phone call, and I stepped away. Wasn't even expecting, I didn't think it was the doctor for some reason. And because I didn't recognize the number, I hadn't saved it. And so I answered the call. They said, congratulations. I was shocked. I was not expecting that. I was for sure they were going to say I wasn't pregnant. I thought I hadn't felt any different, except looking back after that, I could hardly climb the stairs without running out of breath. And you remember our apartment in Hamburg,
Oh,
over
yeah.
the stairs. I was shocked, and I just turn around and I look at them and I like jump out with my arms open. I'm like, and that was a really exciting moment. So we're like, really? Is this happening? This is crazy. It worked. Oh my gosh. And yeah. And then the nausea hits and all of the fun pregnancy side effects. I mean, I was the most miserable pregnant person ever. I hated it. But yeah, then I had our wonderful, amazing daughter. So it was worth it.
Oh my God. I'm like
Yeah.
getting emotional because it's like, I know you and I know your beautiful family and your daughter is just amazing. And I just had no idea. I think also because when we met,
You were pregnant. I will never forget the day we met. I was sat there on the bench with my daughter and my friend, and this woman walks by, this beautiful pregnant woman in a leather beret.
yes.
And I was like, I need to know her.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, you're just the strength that you have. Seriously, I don't know if I could have gone through that, but your light, I think, is what how I can describe. I mean, I wasn't in it, and I'm sure it was a different.
Yeah, and I maybe I'm romanticizing it from, but and I think my husband would say that the hormones were stronger than I like to admit. I remember just kind of saying, okay, these are the next steps. And then with my son, though, when we
I was gonna
decided
say, I'm
to
like,
go
let's
for the
let's
second.
switch gears a bit because okay, you went through you know how your body reacted to your daughter, but
Yep.
plot twist, you guys decide, all right, let's go through the process again with the second child.
Yep.
On top of that, what was happening in your life?
So we were meant to move to London in, what would the year have been? 2020, end of 2022. And about 3 months out, my husband got a job offer in Bali in Indonesia. And, it was this, new startup, and he's in sustainability. And so it was a really good location to be in. And, from living in Singapore, we knew Bali well. We got married in Bali. We loved Bali. And so we're like, okay, we were excited about London, but, why not? Take an adventure. We had pivoted and decided to move to Bali. We looked at each other and we're like, ooh, our doctor and our embryo is here in Germany. So I guess we should try and get pregnant before we go. That was the plan. Like, let's knock it out. Let's get another one. Called up our doctor, told her our time frame, and we made a plan. And the plan was, okay, we only have one embryo, but we might be able to fit in a couple transfers in case the first one doesn't take if we move this along. So she wanted to do a fresh egg retrieval. So she wanted me to start from the beginning so that I would have more than one embryo. And I can't remember all of the logic to that decision. I think there is something about fresh transfers might take better, something like that. So a fresh transfer is when they do it immediately after the egg retrieval. So they retrieve the egg, they introduce the sperm, they create the embryo, they let it grow either 3 to 5 days, depending on what you choose, and then they transfer it. Or they freeze it so that you do it the next month, you do it the next month, so you can always access this. We decided, okay, let's do another retrieval, which is definitely a lot more invasive for me. Those drugs are really strong when you're trying to release more eggs, build up more follicles, things like that. So we decided to do that anyhow. And I mentioned earlier, this is a side effect to IVF that you have to sign all the waivers for because it can be dangerous. And so when you're going through yes, you remember this, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, something, there's another S in there. OHSS is what it's called. So that's when you're overstimulated. So the hormones you took were too strong. And essentially, if you get over like 17 or 18 eggs, it can be essentially you wouldn't do an immediate transfer because you need your hormones to regulate again. So you would typically take a month off and let your hormones regulate and then do a transfer. Because if you do it immediately, essentially what it is your ovaries start leaking water into your body, and it's the hormone HCG is what's causing it. But if you're pregnant, the HCG hormone grows exponentially, right? You probably remember this. That's what pregnancy tests look for, HCG levels. If your HCG is rising exponentially, then this syndrome, OHSS, is only getting worse. And so your ovaries start pumping more and more water into your abdomen, your body cavity, essentially. Because of our time frame, so we got 18 eggs on my second retrieval. So I was overstimulated. And I think it ended up being 12 embryos or something, but there's a lot. We had concerns about OHSS. And the best thing to do is drink a lot of water, try and flush your hormones to counteract this issue. And we talked to the doctor. She said, well, you are at risk for it, but if we're really careful, we might be able to avoid it. You need to drink, I don't know, it felt like 12 liters of water a day. It wasn't, but it was something crazy. For me, and I'm not a water drinker. I drink coffee and maybe wine. And so I'm drinking all this water. But our time frame, we were moving to Indonesia in 7 days. And so I said, listen, we have to do the transfer. And she said, oh, yeah, I agree. We're going to get this in now. And so we did it anyway. And spoiler alert, wasn't a good idea. It was, because we had my incredible son. But we did this transfer anyway. We were flying out of Frankfurt. And so a couple days later that I was looking really bloated. I was like, wow, I'm just not feeling great. Maybe I'm drinking more water, still trying to counteract this. We drive down to Frankfurt and we call the doctor and we're like, hey, this is happening. She said, okay, before you fly, I want you to go see a fertility doctor I know down there. Go see her. And so you're flying out at this point the next day. And so I go see this doctor. I was pretty bloated at this point. And so she did a test and she saw that I already had water in my lungs. She actually said, first of all, you cannot fly. Second of all, I think you need to go check into a hospital tonight because it's only going to get worse. That was just, okay, we have our life packed up to move to Indonesia tomorrow. My husband's job is starting in 4 days. We've got this baby with us. We're not even in our hometown anymore. We're not even in Hamburg. We're in Frankfurt now. All of a sudden, just, okay, rally and shift. Luckily, we had lived in Frankfurt, just outside Frankfurt. So we had amazing friends there. I had to check into the hospital. I ended up being there 2 weeks. I went from being my normal body size, which I'm fairly slender. And within 4 days, I looked 9 months pregnant. And it was really painful and just so uncomfortable. And the swelling in places that you did not know could swell. Let me tell you. I was there for almost 2 weeks and my husband stayed with our amazing friends the whole time. And he brought our daughter over once or twice a day. And so that was really frustrating. It was really uncomfortable and quite painful, to be honest, when your body changes that quickly. And it was a waiting game. I just had to wait it out. I had an IV in and they had to change it every day. Ugh. I was like, more needles? Come on.
And just to be aware, you were still pregnant with your second.
Yeah. So that was the good news of it, is that I was pregnant. There was no risk to the baby. It was just, making sure that the water in my lungs didn't create an issue. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't ever too concerned about that. Yeah, that was a really long 2 weeks and, emotional up and downs. Just that's the longest. Granted, I saw her multiple times a day, but, I hadn't been away from my daughter that long, not sleeping in the same house. And
like, that's not fun. And a German hospital.
oh my God, the food. I mean, I know because I gave birth there to my first, but the food, that should be illegal.
I know. So just to make a note of this, because at least in the US, and we both come from the US, so we know or have a general sense of the expense medical care is, let alone, which some may think it's elective. I think it's, wanting a child, wanting a family, that should be a basic right.
Yep.
There has to have been a financial investment in all of this. Granted, you guys were living in Germany and the healthcare system is different there, but still,
Yeah.
can you speak to that? Going through all of this process, deciding.
Yeah. And, I don't know the price difference.
Well,
between
of course,
IVF.
but just having that financial overview or financial component, was that a part in making the moves that you guys made?
I mean, again, like you said, we were lucky that we were in Germany. And, the longer that I've been out of the US, I've now lived under German healthcare, Indonesian healthcare, Singapore healthcare. I don't think Americans, unless they've lived overseas, fully understand how destroyed American healthcare is. It's probably one of the main reasons why I question whether or not I would live in the US again. The system is so broken. And, when it comes to IVF specifically, I mean, the issues are everywhere in the medical industry there, other than quality, that's excellent. Yeah. But if you have access to it. And so it's given me a lot of empathy having gone through the process that nobody wants to go through in the first place. And, that's for all medical care. Nobody wants to have a surgery, let alone pay the costs. But when it comes to building a family, it really does complete, everything, purpose, happiness, the stress a lot of the times. Because it gives you this full range of emotions and it makes life worth living. It's just this incredible experience. And to have to, for a lot of people, spend your life savings just on maybe not even getting there, just trying. That was a really hard thing to grapple with. Just feeling lucky that it's something we could afford in a country where it's affordable, but then seeing that people, what they go through financially just to have a shot at it in the US was really, it's hard to think through.
Moving to, okay, you're in Frankfurt for 2 weeks. You're in the hospital. You're pregnant with
Yes.
a second child. Your husband's managing and being the primary caretaker of your first child, knowing that the logistics of moving, but I know how stressful that is. How were you able to manage it all?
Well, I wasn't working at the time, which was really helpful. If I had my lifestyle right now, trying to do it all, it would be a lot more challenging. So first and foremost, I have to acknowledge the fact that I didn't have responsibility outside of just managing this scenario. I would say the hardest moment in all of this was obviously got the okay because of the family situation he was dealing with to extend his start date. But at that point, that came to an end. At some point, that came to an end. And so he actually had to fly to Bali ahead of me. And I had to stay back after I had been, so I was released from the hospital, but then I wasn't cleared to fly because of the increased risk of blood clots. So I had to stay back and I was still taking all of these injections, which were now, it was because of the OHSS. I was like, really, again, more needles? I thought we were in the clear. But then I had to take daily injections because I was at high risk for these blood clots. So I had to stay back, do the injections myself. I was then still really swollen. So, probably 4 sizes up in clothing size, really swollen, now caring for my toddler, but also first trimester pregnancy, the nausea was, I don't know if the nausea was starting to come in, but, the out of breath and just some of the initial side effects you have. And so that was really hard. My husband was gone. I had my daughter. I was doing the injections. I was, when you're with a toddler, there's no resting. I was newly pregnant and dealing with, okay, now a move. And then I had to fly from, oh my gosh, this flight will be burned into my memory forever. And, I've flown a lot with my kids. I think my daughter was on like 70 flights her first year. I've flown a lot with both of them even. And this flight, even flying now solo, these 16-hour trips, Seattle to Singapore, are nothing compared to this flight. This was just the crux of it all. Flying from Frankfurt to Singapore, because you have to stop at the time, you had to stop over in Singapore before going to Bali. I was flying to Singapore, and because we had moved all these flights, typically we would sit in the bulkheads where you have a little bit more room. Right. But because this is probably the third time that we've moved this flight back, because we kept thinking, okay, I'll be in the clear. Okay, I wasn't. We had to move the flight back. This flight, I wasn't even in the bulkhead. So I am now bloated and might as well be 6 or 7 months pregnant. I've got my toddler on my lap in a normal, luckily we're on the aisle, but in a normal road seat. So there is just no room. And I think the flight it wasn't too crazy. It was 12 or 13 hours or something. It's long, right? But I guess like after 13 or 14 is when my mindset is like, okay, this is going to be a long flight, buckle up. So we're on this flight, and I am not kidding you. It was the craziest thing. I'm like, oh my God, we made it. And flight tracker in front of me on the screen said 5 minutes to Singapore. I'm like, 5 minutes. We're literally descending. And then all of a sudden the flight turns to the flight tracker changes to Thailand. And I was like, weird. Why would they switch to the next flight already? And why would this plane be going up to Thailand? And I had all these questions. There had been a storm in Singapore, and they had to very last minute. 5 minutes is what the flight tracker said, had to divert us up to Thailand. And so it added 4 hours to the trip, which if you've flown with kids, when you're about to touch down, your body is like, I know. And we had to fly up to Thailand. We had to sit on the tarmac for, I think, 2 hours while they refueled. And then we had to fly back. And when we touched down Thailand, and they said we couldn't even get off the plane, I got up, I walked straight into the bathroom, and I just cried. I was so over that. And if I had been told it was 17 hours going into it, I could have prepared myself. But that extra 4 hours was like, what is going on in my life for all of these things to be happening right now? And that was kind of the start of it, because, we didn't end up having a positive experience in Bali anyhow. But that was just the beginning.
To divert a bit, I'm thinking about those embryos. have them, or are they still in Germany? Have you moved them?
No, they're in Germany. It's funny you ask this right now because I have an email sitting from the fertility clinic asking me if I want to pay rent. That's essentially what it is. We have to pay every 6 months to have them continue freezing the embryos. And so that's a conversation, and I are having probably this week because,
Really?
yeah, I mean, well, so we've since come back to Singapore, which is great because we have, his whole
Yeah.
family's here and schooling's great, healthcare is great, everything's really accessible and clean and easy to get around, and school is subsidized, and just all of these wonderful elements of support that you don't get in the US. It's a really good time for us to be here and we're comfortable, but we do have this idea of we have all these embryos. What do we do? It's tough because I think in a different life, we love our life. It's been crazy. And I don't think it's for everybody, but I wouldn't change anything. But I think had things turned out differently, we would have had 3, maybe 4 kids. We did realistically say we want a big family. We see a big kitchen table later, but with the moves, with just everything that's gone on, moving to Indonesia and now to Singapore, and I don't think we'll have more. I think, we've got 2 incredible, perfect little children, and in a perfect world, we would have had more. But I think at this point, I can't see a way. I'm working long hours and I don't think it's going to work for us. Yeah, that's an interesting endpoint. And for us, that knowing we're done has come from more of a logistical standpoint than an emotional standpoint. And that's been a little bit weird. I can't complain again because we have a great family. Our kids are beautiful and perfect and everything wonderful. And so I feel at peace with that. It's not that, it keeps me up at night. I do feel at peace with it, but it's been more of a logistical decision than it has been emotional.
Which I think is also something to acknowledge too, because decisions don't always have to stem from emotion.
Yeah. And sometimes they can't. You're not given that opportunity. And I think the emotional work that has to be done is to be okay with that.
Right. Hearing your story, I mean, the strength that you have, positivity, just seeing the glass half full, even in all of these twists and turns, I just applaud you. I'm so lucky and blessed to know you because I didn't know this aspect of your journey as a mom. Like you're Wonder Woman to me.
Thank you. There were definitely times where it did not feel like I was Wonder Woman.
So if someone's listening in the middle of rewriting their own fertility script, what would you say to her?
It's tough because everybody approaches it so differently. Saying, try not to worry too much sounds that would have been the last thing I wanted to hear if I were concerned about it, because having kids is the most life-changing experience. Trust the process, which is hard to say because you know that the process can fail you, but trust the process and understand that life can be beautiful no matter where you end up or how you end up there. And also for me, IVF, for some reason, the idea of IVF kids, I think can be hard for some women to grapple with. But I can tell you, if that's a concern for anybody, the second you have your kids, like that's out the window. You'll be so happy that that is the sperm that your doctor chose. You will be so happy that that exact egg came out and they created this most perfect little being. All of those concerns just go away. You'll be so happy you did the process, but I also am very acutely aware that this doesn't work. This doesn't work out for everybody. It's not a positive experience. There's a lot of people out there, and I say people, it's men and women that want a family so badly, and they pour all of this financial investment into it, and they don't have a positive outcome. And, I have so much empathy for those people. So the best you can do is just hope for the best.
Has your story changed the way you define strength?
Is it bad to say no? No.
You're like, girl, I already knew I was strong. So
For me, the process wasn't a highly stressful process. I'm very much like a take it as it comes. International moves stress me out more than IVF stress me out. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. Maybe it's good that we stop at 2 kids, because I'm sure if we had all of a sudden another crazy international move would come up. And so I'm not ready for that. It seems to be how the cards are played at this point.
I see where you are now, like knowing you as an individual and then the hats that you play and the roles that you play in your life and
when I talk about things like this and I talk about kind of the path our life has taken, I do have a moment of that is a little bit crazy what we've done. But when you're in it, you just take it decision by decision and step by step. And I'm not gonna lie, stability is so important with kids. When we left Bali, we really didn't know if we were moving back to the States, if we were moving to Singapore, and it is a stressful time because all of a sudden your decisions, when it was just my husband and me, you're free. We're both educated, able to get jobs, and it frees things up a little bit. But all of a sudden, when you have kids in the picture or when you're pregnant and you need a doctor and checkups and you need that stability, all of a sudden those decisions have a lot more weight to them. And you feel a sense of urgency. That's been a shift, a great shift. Kids are always worth the sacrifice. But yeah, it's made me definitely second guess this third child. I think we have come to a decision.
You never know.
And I think that's the challenge a lot of women have. And I didn't have it at the time because when we moved to Germany, I went into full-time German classes. And so I didn't go straight into work. I was a little bit more free to make those decisions around having kids and starting a family. But now that I am in my career again, I do understand that decision that a lot of women grapple with and really that society doesn't prepare us for or doesn't set us up to succeed in, especially in the US. That decision shouldn't be work or kids. And I'm feeling that now.
Yeah.
I'm now on this great trajectory again. I'm enjoying my work. I feel like myself. And if I have another kid, it's such a terrible word, but do I want to derail all of that?
But it's valid.
Which is, yeah, it is valid, but it's also so crazy because from the workplace perspective, yeah, you do need to take time off. I think most women would understand and agree that being a mother makes you such a better employee because the skill sets that you gain through this new role are so vital. Not even vital because I think that we have skills that men, even though they're fathers, it's a different experience. But I think women specifically gain so many skills that make them a stronger employee. But yet becoming a mother is seen almost as a negative in the workplace because we're not supported properly,
Yeah.
We'll see. Maybe I'll have a third child. Maybe in a year, we'll both be on our third. We'll see.
So as our last question, what
Okay.
script are we screwing today?
The script that we're screwing today is, and you're going to hate this, is that you have to have a plan. And my husband would also disagree with me, but you don't have to have a plan. I had an idea. I had a vision of the future, but I didn't necessarily have a plan to get there. And I'm glad I didn't because if I had, that plan would have completely derailed. And so, a motto I've always had is, with every decision you're making, if it feels right, you're moving in the right direction. That decision of, okay, let's think about getting pregnant. Let's start trying. That felt right. And then when we hit the point of, ooh, this isn't working, maybe we should see somebody about this. That felt right. And, as long as you're making these decisions that ultimately push you in the right direction, then you're doing pretty well, even if you don't exactly know where that direction is taking you.
Oh, I love that. You expressing the difference in vision versus plan really put things into perspective. And I never thought about it like that, actually. I appreciate you taking the time and I'm so looking forward to this new direction in your path. I'm excited what comes next.
I'm hoping for a hiatus and big decision. I'm going to be a bystander for the next little part of my life. I'm ready to just settle in for a little bit.
All right, I'll let you go, Miss Working Girl.
But we need a side catch up because I want to hear all about it.
It's time for the rewrite to resilience, that moment in every episode where we take the story we were handed and flip it. This week's rewrite: you don't need a perfect plan to become the parent you're meant to be. You can feel hopeful and heartbroken at the same time. It's okay to keep your joy while navigating injections, delays, and Plan C. You can grieve what didn't work and still celebrate what did. And it's okay to say we're done and not feel guilty. You can pause, pivot, or stop entirely and still be powerful. Because resilience isn't just about pushing through. It's about honoring what your heart, your body, and your family needs, no matter what the script says. Don't forget to like, comment, and share it with a woman in your life who needs to hear she's already enough. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an unfiltered conversation. And if you've got a story to tell or want to be a guest on the show, DM me on Instagram or TikTok at screwthescriptpod or email me at screwthescriptpod@gmail.com. Until next time, keep rewriting and let's screw the script together.